Well, hello there. So, I think I speak for everyone when I say that Dave Filoni has single-handedly not just made one of the best episodes of Star Wars television ever, but one of the best things, period, that Star Wars has ever conceived of. I don't care if it's a movie, book or comic, video game or television show. This one single episode right here, Episode 5 of the Ahsoka show, titled Shadow Warrior, is pure Star Wars, but in general is an amazing episode of television, regardless if it had that name attached to it or not. Before we get into this video any further, I just wanted to say I'm currently on a goal to try and reach 1,000 subscribers on this channel, which I am very close to, and so I would very much appreciate the support. So, it didn't even take me more than 5 minutes after this episode to immediately start unfolding my thoughts into making this video because, man, do I really want to talk about this. I want to talk about it with myself, and I want to talk about it with other people because there is so much here that is ripe for discussion and conversation. I can't even begin to describe how far off I was with what I predicted that this episode would be. I straight up thought that it would be opening up with the beginning of this episode, with our enemies in the hyperspace ring coming out into this new galaxy, and we see Thrawn's Star Destroyer, the Chimera, right there waiting. And then after that, it would cut to black, and we would go right into the world between worlds with Anakin and Ahsoka. Thankfully, though, one of those predictions of mine was correct, and man, was the second one just everything. Honestly, that's where I want to go to first, because the very beginning made sense as a setup, showcasing Hera figuring out what happened and then seeing Hu Yang holding Sabine's helmet, wishing that things had been different and that they had stuck together like he told them to. So, like I said, right after that, we head to the world between worlds and we see that Anakin and Ahsoka are having a conversation about what's going on, and Anakin is basically telling her that it's time for another lesson, because basically stating the fact that she wants to complete her training, since after all, it was never completed. Basically, from what I can gather with how the lesson was communicated, is that it seems like Filoni wanted to showcase how Anakin is simultaneously teaching Ahsoka in the present a lesson from the past, which in a way is a lot of what she's going through in the present. If that makes any sense and people get what I mean, that's why I think he wanted to showcase those Clone Wars era flashbacks and visions. He wanted to use that time period as a way for these two to go back and learn from what had happened then to now bring it over to the present so that Anakin can finish that training that he started with her all those years ago. When Ahsoka questions if she even wants to fight at all, it does kind of mirror what is happening to her in the present when she lost to Baylan, and maybe that Baylan and all of them were going to get one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy that has ever been seen in Thrawn, who could start another war because of the mistakes that she made. Again, mirroring what she said in that flashback, where she recognizes the mistakes that she made that cost her the lives of some of the men under her orders. And speaking of those men, let me just say this right here. It felt so good to not just see Generation 1 Clone Wars armor again in live action since we last saw it in Attack of the Clones, but it was also even more amazing to see Rex donning that armor in live action. As soon as I saw that man in the corner when he first comes on screen, I lost my shit. He was also voiced by Tamora Morrison, who we all know very well as Boba Fett and played all the live action clones and voiced them. It was so good to see Rex, and this is not the only time that we are going to see him in a Star Wars project in the future, since we all know that he'll be back for the Bad Batch Season 3. Although, I will say my assumption is that this is the only time we are going to see him in this show, because in the present, he's very old, and I don't know if he'll be involved with something that's not involving fighting, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but we'll see if he does show up in the last 3 episodes. I think that we should also jump ship here a little bit and head to the other flashback sequence, which showcases the Siege of Mandalore from Season 7 of the Clone Wars. Ahsoka was there, and that was also the battle right after she saw Anakin for the last time. He even himself admits that he had not seen any of this because he was off trying to rescue Palpatine and kill Count Dooku. I thought that it was so interesting because it basically also showcases the notion that Anakin himself was there with her watching this all go down in the flashback sequence, and in a way it's like almost showing that even as a Force ghost, which I assume that's what he was, like here, was able to do all this with her there. I don't really know, I'm just kind of theorizing because I felt like there were still some questions that I needed answering. As much as I really love these world between world sequences, I do think that one thing that was missing was a small explanation as to how everything unfolded this way. How were they able to travel back and look at all these flashbacks of events that happened before and participate in them while having their conscience speak to the lesson that he was giving her? We already know that the world between worlds gives you the ability to look at an event that happened in the past, but before today's episode, we had never seen someone actually go through into the actual event itself. And I know that some people will say that Ezra did that exact thing already by saving Ahsoka when she fought Vader, but in a way, I don't know if I can necessarily count that because Ezra didn't technically actually jump through into that event. He only pulled her out while still inside of the world between worlds. Again, this is probably Filoni expanding on the power of what the world between worlds can do to somebody. And don't forget, even when in these flashbacks, none of these events changed. Everything still stayed the same. And I know in the case of Ezra saving Ahsoka, that is one that did change, but here in the case of this episode, none of the events changed. It was all still the same. Also, while we are at it and we are talking about these sequences, can I just say, I assume it was Dave Filoni who did this, but whoever came up with the imagery for this episode needs to be given the biggest raise humanly possible. The usage of shots to showcase Anakin walking to only then flash subtly of his Vader form was perfect, because again, after all, Ahsoka knows that he was Vader and is a presence that she definitely hates. She fought against him, and we saw that in the final acts of these world between world sequences where her last part of the duel was fighting against Vader but in Anakin form before he donned the suit, got his legs cut off, and was burnt to a crisp. When she wins the fight and he comes back to the light, he tells her that perhaps there is still hope for her. In a way that is a way I think that I read into what she was never wanting to do, which was she never wanted to stop fighting for him. She always thought that he was still in there somewhere, kind of like how Luke also thought that there was still something in there. And so you could also say that this mirrors the present events that we have been watching through this entire show. No matter if she was defeated at the end of episode 4, she is not going to stop fighting in order to stop Thrawn and hopefully prevent another war from happening. This of course leads us to her being recovered by Hera and the other X-Wings who made it out of the hyperspace explosion. We also got a pretty solid confirmation that Jacen Syndulla, Hera's son, is Force sensitive and very strong with the Force, of course because of the fact that his father was Kanan. The fact that he was able to hear the world between worlds in order to find Ahsoka, I think speaks a lot more to how much more powerful of a future Jedi he could be. Like his father, Kanan was very powerful, and I think that's showcasing itself in the family. Hera seemed to also be able to hear it, which I guess also makes sense considering, again, she's family to both of them. In some ways, you could also say that that was her getting in touch with the Force, since we already know that the Force resides in all living beings, and that was probably her reaching out to hers through her son. The ending of the episode is certainly something to talk about, because as many of you have seen, like myself, we saw that Ahsoka managed to connect with the Purrgils to the point where she was able to tame one with the Force to allow her ship to be carried inside of it so that they can hyperspace jump to the galaxy where Thrawn and all the others are waiting. This was certainly a showcase to tell us that, without a doubt, Ahsoka is now one of, if not the top 3 most powerful Jedi that has ever existed in Star Wars lore. With everything that she has experienced in her life and every event that she has gone through, it honestly kind of makes sense at this point that we would consider her to be that way. With that in mind as well, I know we can also predict that I think the next episode will in fact open with both the good side and the bad side coming out of hyperspace into the new galaxy, and we might finally see Thrawn show up. We are 5 episodes in with 3 left to go, and I think this is a perfect timing to see him come to the story. In general, those are my overall thoughts of the episode, and as you can tell, I'm very ecstatic with what I watched. I still can't get over everything that I saw. I will say though, I did find that I had a couple of nitpicks with it. Like I said already, I do kind of wish that we had gotten some small explanation as to how Anakin was there. Like, I'm sure it is definitely easy to suggest that a Force ghost can just go into the world between worlds, but considering the fact that he was never glowing, it didn't come off that way. I think it's probably more accurate to assume that he was just a vision in Ahsoka's head than it was his actual Force ghost self. I don't really know. I really want to know people's theories on that, to be honest. Something else that I thought I would nitpick a little bit are the last couple of lines. Ahsoka basically says that she doesn't know where the Purrgils are going, and I thought that was An interesting choice of dialogue, considering she definitely knows that they are taking her to the other galaxy. So in some ways, I probably would have changed the wording around a little bit, but maybe that's just me. My other nitpick, and I have definitely noticed it a little bit more, is that some scenes do take a little long to move forward, which it feels like there is a little bit too much empty air there. And don't get me wrong, I love me a slow burn to develop the characters and develop the story, but sometimes that also means not having to drag out a scene a little longer than it needs to. This was also an episode directed by Filoni and not just written by him, and he is somebody who is still fairly new to the live-action directing gig, so by no means am I saying that this was bad work by him. This was incredible work from Dave Filoni. These are just a few things that I personally noticed. So other than that, ladies and gentlemen who might be watching this video, there is nothing more I need to say other than thank you, Dave Filoni, for giving us this episode. This man is a storyteller, the likes of which I am hoping Star Wars uses infinitely for the future. I will also give one last shout out to Kevin Kiner for continuing to make this absolutely incredible score for the show. That man, as I said in the past, needs to be the one who makes Star Wars music for the rest of time, at least until he retires. Truly amazing work. But now, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back and watch this episode 10 more times, and I hope you all do too. Please let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and like this video if you enjoyed what I had to talk about, and if you also enjoyed the episode. As I said at the beginning, I am very close to 1,000 subscribers, and I would appreciate if you could subscribe and help me get there. I hope everyone here has a wonderful rest of the week, and I hope to see you all very soon. May the Force be with you.